Hello and welcome to another entry in Movie Gear Solid, the YouTube series dedicated to tracking down all the cinematic influences behind Hideo Kojima's iconic series, Metal Gear Solid. Today we'll be looking at two key films by one of Kojima's favorite directors, Roland Emmerich. They are Stargate and Independence Day. Stargate, starring James Spader and Kurt Russell, was an influential movie to say the least. You might not have guessed it today, but back in the 90s, this film's influence for a brief time seemed to be about on par with Jurassic Park or almost even Star Wars. This spiritual retelling of the Exodus myth in space may have only been, over time, a cult classic at best, but it reinvigorated interest in Egyptology, and more importantly, paved the way for the more popular and more beloved film, maybe Emmerich's finest, 1996's Independence Day. Let's address these movies and what they mean for Kojima and Metal Gear Solid, one at a time. Stargate begins when Jackson, an Egyptologist and cunning linguist, cracks the code of hieroglyphics on an ancient structure found and recovered by the U.S. Army in the Egyptian desert. For eons, the famed pyramids of Egypt's pharaohs have allured researchers and commoners alike with their wordless mysteries. Jackson stumbles upon their true purpose, which has to do with not merely ancient Egyptian religion, but secret ancient alien technology, in this case called the Stargate. Traveling through the Stargate back to the apparent homeworld of the human race, Jackson is accompanied by Special Operations Colonel Jack O'Neill. O'Neill recently lost his own son to suicide thanks to an accident in the home involving his own firearm. As a result, he agrees to what only he is told ahead of time will prove to be a suicide mission. This suicide mission takes the team into the heart of the true alien civilization which fathered humanity as we know it today, in a bizarre and highly campy retelling, you might say, of the biblical tale of Moses and the Pharaoh in ancient Egypt. I'm reminded by Jackson's shadowy Special Forces unit, draped in all black, of XOF from MGS5. And/or Foxhound from MGS 1 and 2. These guys are a super secret and elite group of Special Forces operators. Pretty cool, right? It turns out the pyramids work as a kind of wormhole, which transport Jackson and his team to another world. The film depicts their struggle getting home. O'Neill's team of black-clad XOF or Foxhound-esque Special Ops forces wind up depending on Jackson's esoteric knowledge and insights, especially of ancient Egyptian culture, history, and most of all, language. In a decidedly Kojima fashion, Stargate flips the conventional action story format on its head to project its science fiction qualities in a more entertaining light. This is a new kind of action sci-fi for its time, a kind which draws heavily on everything from ancient history to linguistics and esoteric theories about the origins of our species. Though the film received mixed reviews even from its own cast members, its influence on every Kojima game since 1998's MGS1 seems readily apparent. Even Death Stranding prominently features the Stargate-derived idea of leaping through wormholes to visit other faraway worlds, to visit other faraway planes, all of it presented with a huge focus on the customs of yet again ancient Egypt. Stargate even features the threat of global annihilation brought about by nuclear weapons, just as every Metal Gear Solid game does. In this film, we see much of what influenced Kojima during the creation of the MGS series. In fact, I'd bet money that Stargate's influence on Hideo Kojima extends all the way to our present era of Death Stranding 1 and 2. No, not just in terms of all the Egypt stuff. Just look at Stargate's sleek, ever-cerulean sci-fi aesthetic and tell me it doesn't look familiar. But as far as Metal Gear is concerned, look no further than the Otacon and Snake-like relationship in the film between Stargate's Dr. Daniel Jackson and Colonel Jack O'Neill, like I said, played by Kurt Russell. Like in MGS 1 and 2, in Stargate we come to see the two different kinds of modern sci-fi heroes, the Special Forces Commando on the one hand and the nerdy hacker on the other. It also helps entertainment-wise that together they're complete opposites, like the Odd Couple. And no, I'm not doing an episode on the movie Twins. Yes, Twins seemingly influenced the creation of Liquid as opposed to Solid Snake in MGS1, but that's all I'm going to say about that. Beyond the twinkling blue shades of sci-fi, Stargate shares in common with Death Stranding, also consider this. It's concept art for the character Ra, who in Stargate takes the form of a spaceborne parasite that merely uses the visage of a human as its host for the film's duration. Many elements of Ra's character and origins would inform and inspire the character for Metal Gear Solid 5, Skullface, including the horrifying vocal cord parasites that he will attempt to weaponize and unleash, as well as that game's theme of language as a virus. That's right, it all seems to be inspired, at least in part, from Stargate. In a way, the virus of the story of the Old Testament is something that Stargate, by depicting, is also helping to spread like a disease. The Clash of Civilizations theme, however, would be expressed much more definitively in Emmerich's second film of major importance to the Metal Gear series, Independence Day. So to recap, before we move on from Stargate, this skull-face looking alien thing is the Egyptian god Ra from the film. He's a parasite that's effectively possessed the body of this human like a demon, and he plays the part in Stargate's version of Exodus of the Pharaoh, with this lost tribe of humans, his intergalactic slaves, that the film depicts being liberated. All these references via sci-fi tropes to stories from the Bible arguably would help inspire MGS1's Shadow Moses and its Book of Exodus Plague, Foxdie, not to mention the game's liberal use of Old Testament names and references like David for Snake, Naomi, or of course the name Emmerich as in Hal Otacon Emmerich, which is a direct explicit reference to Roland Emmerich himself. Next, we have Emmerich's much better known film, 1996 Independence Day. With an all-star cast led by 90s box office behemoth Will Smith, Independence Day shook Hollywood and with it the world to its very foundations. Yet again, we get a hacker-shooter duo, this time with Jeff Goldblum instead of James Spader, playing almost the exact same role. When extraterrestrials attack America, the entire planet unites to drive the Phantom Menace from beyond back from whence it came, namely the stars. Leading the retaliation are, of course, Americans, with Goldblum's David Levinson and Smith's Captain Stephen Hiller's combined efforts. The world might just get to declare Independence Day against the alien invaders once and for all. The influence on Metal Gear here is pretty hard to miss. It's a political thriller by way of Saturday morning cartoon, a combo of fun and tension, reality and fantasy that's rarely found anywhere this pure. Will Smith, like Snake, is of course a one-line machine. Independence Day openly, yet unknowingly, invites a firebrand like Kojima to utilize its formula in pursuit of a message with more substance. It's a big, loud movie with not much to say, but it's great fun as a summer block party classic, and its role in helping Kojima solidify a working concept for MGS, hopefully, upon reviewing if you haven't seen it in a while, couldn't be clearer. At bottom, Independence Day and Stargate are both about civilizational clashes, about technology and history and culture, on a level that feels familiar for any MGS fan. Though it's less easy in Independence Day's case to point to specific references in Metal Gear Solid, I'd contend Kojima learned quite a lot from this film's broad characters and ostensibly global perspective. It's a comic book scenario that plays out semi-seriously with all the features of a more believable, gritty political thriller, almost like a Tom Clancy movie, just with aliens instead of, say, a runaway Russian nuclear submarine. Independence Day reinvented the modern Hollywood blockbuster. It did so by presenting a universal threat to an ostensibly global audience. In this regard, we might compare Independence Day's aliens to the much more real-world universal threat posed by nuclear proliferation in MGS. You can tell Kojima has been deeply inspired by Emmerich's use of broad, pulpy, comic book-esque character archetypes as vehicles for genuine human emotion and even as a way of touching on real themes, imported from the real world.
Perhaps it's fate that today is the 4th of July, and you will once again be fighting for our freedom.
That's right. George Washington took office as the first president of the United States of America 200 years ago today. And it happened right here. We were going to declare another independence, the dawn of a new nation, here.
Independence Day is campy, glorious, glowing, summer blockbuster fun. It's exactly that same spirit of creativity and verve informing Kojima's MGS series, which may have more to offer under the surface, but is no less viscerally entertaining for mass audiences. Without the popcorn factor that it borrows from movies like Independence Day, MGS would cease to be as relevant simply by ceasing to be nearly as fun. Yet, in a bizarre way, Independence Day is roughly also about the nature of war, what it is and how it defines humanity. We see the entire human race bind together in the film to defeat the evil alien invaders in a cinematic fulfillment of an old Cold War prophecy that all it would take to bring East and West together would be a well-armed enough surprise alien invasion. In this coming together, the human divisions and tribalism which have defined our species' bloody history are indirectly illustrated by Independence Day to perhaps be mutable and illusory. It's a very utopian film, a very 90s film, a time when such a global unity was believed not only possible, but imminent. It may seem today like a silly daydream, and it was never meant to be taken too seriously. But all that aside, Independence Day provided a huge influence on most of Kojima's games since debuting in the mid-90s, and both draw a lot of influence from a shared ancestor, a film that we'll discuss next time on Movie Gear Solid, 1968's iconic Planet of the Apes. With Stargate in 1994 and Independence Day in 1996, Roland Emmerich helped revitalize cinematic sci-fi and reinvented the American blockbuster. Kojima may have inverted Independence Day's stridently patriotic message, and questioned whether the true invading force is not already in fact based in Washington, D.C., but Kojima's commitment to civic values and human decency, his method of marrying the heavier things to the lightest of dime store novel tropes, it all feels heavily indebted to Roland Emmerich and his run of 90s action-adventure blockbusters. Until next time, boss.